Welcome! Today, we are going to cover the case of Jessica Kaler, the woman who claimed she beheaded her mother in self-defense. This case has been recommended to us countless times, likely due to the brutality of the attack and the ridiculousness of the defense. Regardless of the reason, as we began to research the story, we felt compelled to discuss it. This case includes graphic and upsetting details which may not be suitable for sensitive viewers, so please be mindful of that before continuing. With all of that said, let us begin. Jessica was born on October 12, 1993, to parents Rita and Vince Cammer in Sydney, Australia. Jessica was the pair's second daughter, and they were excited to expand their family. However, from the beginning of Jessica's life, they knew something was very wrong. Jessica was different from the other kids, and within the first couple of years of her life, struggled to hit basic cognitive milestones. Walking, talking, and coordination were a struggle for her, and her parents took her to multiple specialists to try and address the issue. Whatever was wrong with Jessica, they were ready and willing to seek help immediately, not only so she could get the proper care, but so they could give her the life she deserved. Rita was extremely careful and attentive with Jessica, wanting to help her young daughter in any way she could. But the problems would only multiply as Jessica got older. Though her mother could describe her as a loving but misunderstood child, as Jessica aged, she began to display alarming aggressive behavior towards anyone she deemed worthy. She had a terrifying temper and an incredibly short fuse, often lashing out at her parents and sister for slights as small as not paying enough attention to her or disrespecting her in some way. If she believed that a person deserved to be the center of her malice, she would attack them through any means necessary, with little regard towards her own personal safety. Rita would attempt to appease her daughter's outbursts, tending to placate her daughter, whereas Vince would rather discipline her. Things would only get worse when Jessica was eventually enrolled in school. Jessica's developmental delays and odd behavior were noted by other children, and she became the subject of ridicule. She was ostracized and bullied, although exact details were never made available. With the addition of her aggressive behavior, her parents took her to more specialists who diagnosed the child with a swath of different mental illnesses. According to her medical records, Jessica had an IQ of 55 to 60, which put her at the bottom 1% of the world's population. As a reference, the IQ of an average person is somewhere between 90 and 110. She was similarly diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, and intermittent explosive disorder. The Mayo Clinic website states that intermittent explosive disorder involves repeated, sudden bouts of impulsive, aggressive, violent behavior or angry verbal outbursts. The reactions are too extreme for the situation. Road rage, domestic abuse, throwing or breaking objects, or other temper tantrums may be symptoms of intermittent explosive disorder. The list of diagnoses Jessica could possibly have grew with time, with her also being diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, dyslexia, and schizophrenia at various intervals. Beyond just throwing normal temper tantrums, Jessica would wreak havoc on her teachers, classmates, and family. If a teacher looked at the young girl the wrong way, or she simply didn't like their tone, she would disrupt class, sometimes attempting to strike the teacher. The majority of her anger centered on women, whom she seemed to view as potential romantic adversaries. Her female classmates were subjected to the worst of Jessica's anger, with her often responding to slights by pulling their hair and hitting them repeatedly. Jessica did attack one boy while at school, and though the details of the attack are vague, court documents state that Jessica bit the boy's arm for an unknown reason, then refused to release her bite even after multiple teachers got involved. Sources allege that it took 4 teachers to pull her away from the other student, but again, documentation on this incident is vague and the source that originated that claim has not been fully corroborated at this time. Rita became Jessica's most fervent advocate. She would explain her daughter's behavior to the school and those who were subjected to her wrath, attempting to dispel tensions. Despite her insistence that Jessica was a good girl with only a few issues, she was eventually asked to leave the school during her freshman year for the safety of the staff and students. Following her untimely exit from the education system, Jessica entered the Nova Transition to Work program, an Australian program that works exclusively with people who have significant barriers keeping them from entering the workforce. The program works alongside individuals, providing them with tangible life skills and help with things like using public transportation, speaking with others, completing tasks on a schedule, and understanding what is being asked of them while on the job. Nova's approach to helping people obtain jobs and further gain independence in their life is extensive, offering counseling and real-world experience to those in the program. But once more, Jessica's anger got the better of her. After another explosive incident where the police had to be called, she was removed from the program. Vince and Rita determined after her expulsion from Nova that it would be better if she stayed with her grandmother for a short time. They wanted some time together to establish how they would deal with Jessica's increasingly horrendous behavior. But shortly after arriving at her grandmother's home, her violent tendencies reappeared. Jessica grew angry and resentful towards her aunt, feeling as though she was taking attention away from her. This belief led Jessica to grab her aunt by the hair and pull her down some concrete steps outside the home. She was then sent back to live with her parents, much to their dismay. At this point, Rita and Vince's relationship had deteriorated, and the once loving couple turned to separation. Vince would state that Jessica's behavioral issues had driven a wedge between him and his wife. Rita was the only person that Jessica was close to, but she had no idea how to discipline the young girl. The tired mother had gone to multiple specialists, doctors, and even a psychic, whom she paid $2,500 to get the demon out of Jessica, but no one was able to help. Mood stabilizers, antipsychotics, and antidepressants had all been prescribed to Jessica over the years with absolutely nothing working. Without any plan or assistance, Rita ultimately determined the best way to handle her daughter's issues was to placate her as much as possible, which Vince detested. He wanted to have more authority in Jessica's life and establish boundaries and repercussions for her negative actions, but Rita was opposed to the idea. Jessica, it would seem, knew that she could get away with more with her mother than with her father, and would routinely abuse that power. Unable to reach an understanding, Vince left the family home, though he worried greatly about his wife's safety. Eventually, Christy, Jessica's older sister, also left the home, leaving Rita alone with the woman who would go on to kill her. Because Jessica struggled to interact with the world at large, she developed multiple alarming obsessions. The first was an obsession with graphic slasher films, such as The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Saw, and Jeepers Creepers, whose director we have previously covered as a pedophile. Though an appreciation for the genre is normal and not an indicator of potential homicidal tendencies, Jessica's obsession went beyond that of an average person. She would watch these movies on a loop every day and owned multiple copies of each. Her sister Christy would state that Jessica's fascination with the gory material often alarmed her. She testified that while living with her sister, she repeatedly hid the DVDs to try and curb Jessica's consumption of the material. But whenever the angry young woman realized she didn't have access to these movies, she would lash out, often striking her or Rita. Every time, either Rita would relent, buying her a new copy of the movie, or Christy would give back the originals. But her violent tendencies were not limited to her relatives. Between 2012 and 2019, Jessica assaulted multiple women in public with seemingly no repercussions. According to court documents, in September of 2012, Jessica took hold of a woman's hair while she held her newborn in a supermarket, pulling her to the ground. She repeated this exact assault months later in December, grabbing another woman at a supermarket checkout counter without provocation. When Jessica was expelled from the Nova program, she once again grabbed another woman by the hair and pulled her to the ground. The following month, while waiting for a doctor's appointment, she believed another woman in the waiting room was staring at her and saw red. She then attacked the woman, pulling her hair. In September that same year, Jessica went to the hospital after suffering from a severe panic attack, and once more assaulted another stranger in the waiting room. As with every time prior, Jessica believed that the person was staring at her and lost control. Court documents placed the next assault in 2016, 3 years later. It's unlikely, if not impossible, that no other assaults took place during this time. But given that both Vince and Christy had left the familial home, Jessica likely took the majority of her anger out on her mother, leading to it never being reported. In March of 2016, Jessica attacked a stranger for less reason than she ever had, seemingly planning out an assault. She waited near a bus stop by her home, and when another woman got off the bus, she called out to her, feigning an injury. She asked if the woman would come help her, and when she did, Jessica grabbed the woman by the hair and attempted to drag her to the ground. These assaults were reported. However, due to Jessica's disabilities and clear mental health issues, they went nowhere. Jessica never had to face consequences for her actions, which directly put anyone around her in danger. She was also obsessed with numbers, associating them with colors, and constantly finding new patterns of numbers in the world that she thought were beautiful. She became consumed by these patterns and found ways to interject the numbers into her daily life. This numerical compulsion led to her making up phone numbers to call throughout the day, often hundreds of times. Jessica would talk to whoever answered the call, but notably treated male responders differently than females. Court documents state that Jessica's preference towards men was due to her attraction to them, although no party was safe from her wrath. When she talked to these strangers, the conversations would quickly turn dark, describing in graphic detail how she would like to murder them. When the person on the other line was a woman or sounded female in any way, Jessica immediately started with the threats, telling them that she was going to come to their home and cut their heads off. In 2015, Jessica called Natalie Naylor over 42 times in the month of October. Her calls were threatening in nature, and she stated, "I will come over to your door with a knife in my hand and slit your throat myself. I will come over to your house with a knife in my hand, and I will shred off your head to your neck, and you will have no head left. I will ram that knife right through your neck and cut off your whole head." But when she spoke to men, she behaved differently. She tried to establish some form of connection and attempted to flirt with them. It was only when she sensed they wanted her to get off the call that they were subjected to the same anger she reserved mostly for women, threatening them should they end their conversation. She called one family in Bangladesh over 100 times in one day and harassed the family for over a year. When asked why she did this, she stated that she simply liked their number. In 2018, Jessica's prank calls escalated further. She called another man over 100 times in one day. Her obsession with his phone number went beyond her previous antics, as after she was done harassing him, she looked up the number and found his company's online directory. She then began calling this man's coworkers and everyone within the company repeatedly, threatening their lives and telling them that she was going to saw off their heads and flush them down a toilet. But she didn't stop there. Armed with the names and phone numbers of every person working at the company, she reached out to all the employees' friends and family, repeating her threats. Reports vary on if the original man contacted was Matthew Layfield, or if she discovered the factory worker after already harassing his coworkers, but she centered the majority of her attention on him. Layfield's photo had been on the company's website, and Jessica was immediately enamored with him. She called him the most, and when she found out he was married, she repeatedly threatened to kill his wife and any other woman in his life. When Rita became aware of her daughter's phone calls, she was horrified. She tried to apologize to the men and women her daughter had harassed. On a phone call with Matthew Layfield the day of her murder, she informed him that she would be taking action. Layfield would later testify that Rita sounded like a woman at the end of her rope. She had put her youngest daughter first for the last 25 years of her life, and nothing seemed to be working. She had gone to every professional in the area, tried medicine, natural remedies, and everything she could think of, but nothing worked. The only thing left was to institutionalize her daughter, which she had fought against for years. But having heard what Jessica had been doing, she decided to put herself first for the first time in 2 decades. Or at least, that's what she had planned to do. On July 19, 2019, Rita was made aware that Jessica had once again made a swath of harassing phone calls to strangers. At her wit's end with her daughter, she brought the 25-year-old to the police station with the hope that the cops would scare her straight. Rita informed the cops that very morning, her daughter had called a man over 30 times and repeated that she hoped he would get cancer and die, before adding that if he didn't, she would find him and kill him herself. The officers spoke to Jessica, telling her that if she were to continue harassing strangers the way she had been, eventually the police would have to step in. This encounter frustrated Jessica, who would later be heard screaming at her mother for bringing her to the police station. The following day, an unidentified young relative came over to the Cammer home. Rita had offered to look after the child for the day, much to Jessica's chagrin. Almost immediately after the child's arrival, Jessica became irate, believing the child was taking away her mother's time and attention. Rita tried to placate her daughter, but as long as she focused any attention on the child, Jessica was furious. Later that day, an elderly neighbor came to the home requesting immediate help as they were experiencing pain in their chest. They asked to be driven to the hospital, which Rita immediately agreed to. The neighbor would testify that Rita was incredibly prompt in grabbing her things and getting into the car. But Jessica began to berate her mom, stating that they would have left faster had they not had to bring the child along with them. She repeatedly referred to the child as a little bastard and refused to stop despite the neighbor's insistence. Rita, for her part, tried to get Jessica to calm down, but she refused to listen. Rita, Jessica, and the unidentified relative waited for the neighbor as she underwent treatment for the pain in her chest. But things remained tense. At some point, Jessica saw a man on the street look at her. This passing glance was enough to escalate her anger towards Rita, as she blamed her mother for the man looking at her strangely. She claimed that Rita had embarrassed her in front of the stranger and swore at her loudly, causing even more people to stare at her. This aggressive display caused the child in Rita's care to cry, which only made things worse. After making sure their neighbor was all right, the group returned home, but tensions had not improved. By that evening, Jessica began complaining about severe stomach pain. She told her mother to call a doctor to come home and make sure she was all right. Sometime between when Rita called for the at-home doctor to come and 9:25 p.m., the relatives sat down for a meal of Red Rooster. Jessica ate the meal happily with no signs of physical discomfort, and, after finishing, requested that the family get more. Rita said no, telling her daughter that she had had enough. Jessica, not caring about what her mother had said, called the establishment to order more food but began harassing the workers, demanding that they tell her they loved her. At 9:25 p.m., the home doctor, Eliza Asom, arrived. She testified that Jessica did not appear to be in physical distress, and that, despite Rita repeatedly trying to get her off the phone to be examined by the doctor, Jessica refused, demanding that the person on the other line continue talking to her. Eliza left after 10 minutes of trying to get Jessica to comply with the medical care she requested. After Dr. Asom left the home, Rita became overwhelmed with the situation. She called her eldest daughter and told her about what had happened, stating she feared she could no longer take care of Jessica. She told Christy that she was going to call for an ambulance to pick up Jessica and have her institutionalized. Christy supported her mother's decision, stating that it was what she needed to do, and she heard Jessica react to the information. Jessica had always feared institutionalization and had been heard saying on various occasions that she would rather kill someone than end up in a mental health facility. And within the next few hours, she would do both things. After getting off the phone with Christy, Rita attempted to call for an ambulance, but Jessica stopped her. Jessica held her mother down, took the phone away from her, and stated that she would not be going to any hospital. But Rita was determined. She got up and made her way to Jessica's bedroom with the intention of using her daughter's phone to call for emergency services once again. A physical fight broke out, and once more, Jessica was able to gain control over her mother. At some point during the confrontation, Jessica grabbed her mother by the hair and dragged her into the kitchen of the home. She physically restrained Rita using her own body weight, then grabbed a selection of kitchen knives. Jessica began stabbing her mother countless times in the head and neck, with one wound going through Rita's eye into her brain. She stabbed her mother so many times with so many knives that she decapitated the woman who had protected and cared for her entire life. The attack was brutal, with Rita desperately fighting against her daughter. She had a combined total of 95 defensive wounds on her arms and hands, meaning that for a significant part of the attack, Rita was alive. But even after she died, Jessica did not stop. 4 knives broke during the attack, with a total of 7 being used. During the initial stages of the murder, the child that Rita had been caring for was asleep. He woke up at some point, likely due to the noise, and went to see what was wrong. At just 4 years old, he saw Jessica killing Rita and attempted to provide aid. He ran towards Rita, wanting to get Jessica off of her, but was subsequently attacked. He jumped onto Jessica's back, trying to pull her off of Rita, and when that failed, he grabbed a large cardboard box and struck her with it repeatedly. Jessica pushed him away, cutting his face with the kitchen knife in the process. After being stabbed, the 4-year-old threw up and hid in the home. Before we go any further, the child is alive and is okay. After Jessica had stabbed her mother over 100 times and tore her head off, she grabbed it and walked outside, where she then tried to get help. She called emergency services once, then hung up. The following is the call made from emergency services back to Jessica. Emergency services. Hello, this is Allison from Police Emergency. We just received a call from this number. Jessica. Yes, I need you to get the ambulance and the police out here immediately. Emergency services. To which address, please? Jessica. Please come, I need you. This is an immediate life situation. Emergency services. Which suburb or town is that in? Jessica. Listen, can you talk to the neighbor? My hand is bleeding here. Thank you. Can you talk to my neighbor? Neighbor. Hello? Emergency services. Hi, what happened? Neighbor. I don't know. We were just home and she came in screaming for help. When I opened the door, she said, "Just help me and call the police or ambulance," and said to me she had a fight with her mom, I think. Jessica. Okay. My mom tried to stab me, and I think I killed her in self-defense. This is patently false and, in many people's opinion, showcases that Jessica knows right from wrong. Immediately after killing her mother and stabbing a 4-year-old in the face, Jessica had already come up with an excuse as to why it was necessary. However, because of her multiple medical issues and mental disorders, it's very possible that Jessica believes what she is saying is true. Again, if someone said they were going to hang up on a phone call, she would repeatedly make threats toward them. If someone stared at her on the street, she felt justified in attacking them. It's possible that she viewed her mother stating she was going to call the ambulance to send her away as being a literal threat to her life, but probably not. One of the main issues with cases like this is that the reasoning will never make sense to the average person, and so many people attempt to make it fit into their worldview. They think about what they would have done if they were Jessica, and how someone with their mental capacity would go about covering for a crime they committed. But we can never truly know, as we're not wired the same way. Emergency services. So, did she just say her mom tried to stab her? Neighbor. I don't know. Yes. Jessica. Yes, in self-defense. I think I killed her. Can you tell them to come immediately? Emergency services. Can you please just come immediately, please? Emergency services. Okay, so she believes that she may have killed her mother? Neighbor. Yes, she said like this. Yes. Emergency services. Is she with you at the moment? Neighbor. Yes, she's in the front yard of my house. Emergency services. All right, how old is her mother? Jessica. How old is my mother? I think 57. Emergency services. So is she not conscious? Jessica. No, I stabbed her because she tried to kill me. Emergency services. Okay, did you check if she was breathing? Neighbor. No, because we didn't go to her house because I'm outside my house and can't go there. Emergency services. Okay, can I talk to her? Jessica. Hello? Emergency services. Hi, can you tell me what happened? Jessica. My fingers are broken. My mom had enough of me because I admit I've been a challenge. This ongoing thing has been going on for months. She had enough of me, grabbed me by the hair, and dragged me from my room all the way to the kitchen. She got a knife and tried to stab me with it. I grabbed the knife off her because I thought she was going to stab me, so I stabbed her back. I was so heated up with anger, I just kept stabbing and stabbing and stabbing her, and I took off her head. Everything Jessica just stated that Rita had done, from pulling her hair to dragging her into the kitchen, physical evidence showed she actually did. Jessica. Her head is, I ran to my neighbor, not this neighbor, my other neighbor. He was at work. I told him to call the ambulance and police immediately. He was going to do so, but no one's at home because everyone in the family is at work now. I had my mom's head in my hand. I know this sounds insane, but I was taking it for evidence to show the neighbor. In the struggle, in the frustration, I didn't know what I was doing. I cut her head off. I chopped her head off with a knife. Emergency services. What type of knife was it? Jessica. There were all sorts of knives. There were about 7 knives. I was stabbing her with a few of the knives. Some of the knives broke. When a knife broke, I got another one and did the same. Emergency services. Where are the knives now? Jessica. They're all in the kitchen. There's blood everywhere. I'm outside the house. Emergency services. Okay, is the ambulance and police there now? Jessica. Yes. Emergency services. Do you want to stay on the phone? Jessica. No, that's okay. What's your phone number? Jessica. This is my mom's phone number, but my mom's not here anymore. She's gone. Emergency services. All right, I'll let you go speak to the police. Okay. When the police arrived, they were horrified at what they found. Jessica had savagely butchered her mother, removing her eyes, tongue, and nose in the attack. Even though she claimed the decapitation was accidental and she hadn't meant to hurt her mother at all, the physical evidence showed that she had twisted Rita's head and pulled it off after stabbing her over 100 times. Despite Jessica repeatedly stating that her mother had broken her finger in the attack, she was entirely unharmed. She repeated the story she had told to emergency services, that her mother had attacked her, dragged her into the kitchen, and she wrestled the knife away to defend herself. But the sheer gore at the scene painted a very different picture. She also repeatedly asked the officers if they could bring her mother back to life. She asked if they could sew her head back onto the body because doctors perform miracles, and appeared distraught when the police told her otherwise. She was immediately arrested and charged with her mother's murder. One of the main hurdles that needed to be overcome was if Jessica was fit to stand trial. The young woman had killed her mother and assaulted multiple women over small, insignificant slights, and the idea that she would be able to sit through a trial without an outburst seemed impossible. Both the defense and the prosecution had experts speak to and observe her, finding that although the trial would likely be difficult for her and certain concessions would have to be made, Jessica would be able to receive judgment for her crimes. Notably, the defense never argued that Jessica hadn't been the one to kill her mother, or that Rita had been the aggressor in the altercation. Instead, they focused their arguments on Jessica's mental well-being, stating that due to the comorbidity of her mental disorders, she could not be found guilty of first-degree murder, but should be charged with manslaughter. Both sides had experts to supplement their case, and Jessica's own family stood against her, telling the public that they believed she committed the act because she knew her mother was going to put her foot down. The jury later sided with the defense, and Jessica was sentenced to a maximum of 21 years and 7 months in prison, with a non-parole period of 16 years and 2 months. But as expected, her prison sentence has not been without issue. As we've established, Jessica hates women. She views them as competition for men's attention, and the only person she was quasi-okay with was her mother, whom she murdered. Putting her in a facility with nothing but women has led to a significant number of assaults on other inmates and correctional officers. 7 weeks after her arrest, Jessica attacked another inmate because, as she put it, she was upset. Following that incident, she got in trouble again after throwing a cup of hot tea on another inmate. Following an initial interaction, Jessica made her way to the kitchen, filled a foam cup with hot water, made tea for herself, and threw it on the inmate. She received no penalty for either attack, but was charged for them. A month or so later, she attacked another inmate and was given 5 days in her cell. Shortly thereafter, she assaulted another inmate, ripping the hair out of her head for another perceived slight. This assault had a significant effect on Jessica, as the other party actively fought back against her, striking her multiple times. Throughout her life, Jessica never had to deal with anyone fighting back. She was always the physically dominant party, willing to take things much further than anyone else. But in this instance, she was forced to deal with another physically dominant party. She cowered, and her psychiatrist noted a change in her behavior following the assault. Her psychiatrist noted that she became more cautious. When approaching other prisoners, though she felt the desire to assault people regularly, she would refrain to protect herself. However, the fear of reprisal did not last, and she continued to assault more people. On April 15, 2021, Jessica attacked another inmate, this time over food. According to witnesses, Jessica became upset during lunch after somehow obtaining 3 prison meals. She approached another inmate and stated that she was still hungry, then asked who she could ask for more food. The inmate looked at the meals Jessica was already holding and told her that she believed she had had enough. This was enough for Jessica to feel justified in grabbing the seated woman by the hair, pulling so hard that she fell to the ground and ripping out the hair she was holding. Following that incident, Jessica went on to attack 2 prison guards. Jessica told a psychiatrist that she attacked the first guard because she simply didn't like them and wanted to give them a little bit of their own medicine. She did this by ripping their hair from their scalp in a fit of rage when the officer stood in the doorway of her cell. The second attack on a prison guard occurred months later when Jessica was asked by the second guard to put her arms out so she could be handcuffed. Footage of the attack shows the guard talking to Jessica respectfully, not taunting or goading her, and Jessica attacking directly after. After these attacks, Jessica's non-parole period was extended by 1 year, but that did little to assuage her behavior. Despite these ongoing incidents and her continued aggressive behavior, Jessica's legal representation was able to successfully appeal her sentence, reducing it from 21 years and 7 months with parole becoming available after 16 years to 16 years with the possibility of parole after 12 years. Justice Peter Hamill denied that Jessica's sentence was excessive or that the trial had been unfair to her in any way, but nonetheless changed the sentence as he felt it was clear that she was not in her right mind. On March 7, 2023, Jessica was on a supervised walk through the main prison when she approached a group of inmates. These inmates told Jessica that they didn't want her anywhere near them because they knew what she'd done and emphasized that fact by telling her to get lost. A guard noted the disruption and told the women to separate, but not before one of the other inmates threw water on Jessica. She instructed the inmates to move away and approached Jessica, who she believed to be the victim in the circumstance. She placed her hand on Jessica's shoulder, seemingly to comfort her or to see if she was all right, and then Jessica attacked. Her hair was also ripped from her scalp. Notably, at some point during the attack, Jessica bit the guard. Later that same day, Jessica was being looked over by medical personnel in her cell. There was a medical officer alongside another correctional officer in Jessica's cell, trying to assess if she was okay. However, during the assessment and seemingly with no provocation, Jessica attempted to attack the medical officer. The other officer in the cell got between the two and tried to restrain Jessica, then subsequently became her target. As of this writing, she has still not been sentenced for the additional attacks. In our personal opinion, Jessica should never be released from prison. She poses a danger to herself and everyone around her. She killed the person closest to her and slashed a 4-year-old in the face with a knife, and she continues to attack others unprovoked. Let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments down below. If you've made it to this portion of the video, thank you for watching.